How's it going, everybody? This is Kevin Asani, and you are watching the Progressive Square. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've got a packed show today, going to be covering some interesting topics. Before we get started here, I just wanted to let you guys know to please check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith. If you can become a patron and give me a generous contribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, for more information about this podcast, check out the hashtag #TheProgSquare on Twitter. That will direct you to all my live broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. All right, so let's get started with the first segment here. So apparently there is a big brouhaha that started to kind of simmer a little bit between the establishment Democrats and the Justice Democrats. So the Justice Democrats, for those of you that don't know, is the group that was started by Cenk Uygur, Kyle Kulinski, and a couple of other former Bernie Sanders operatives. So this is a group that is basically pushing for every politician or candidate, essentially. So because there's a bunch of politicians, like a few politicians that are currently in office that were already in office, and they decided to join the Justice Democrats. And then there's also candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and a couple of others. Ayanna Pressley is another one that are candidates that were elected recently, but they were running as Justice Democrats leading up to their election, and they won their election under the Justice Democrats banner. And essentially, what Justice Democrats pushes for, and what they expect of their candidates and their and the people that are in those, currently in those seats, is to maintain the status quo of Medicare for all, free college, a living wage, ending the wars, any kind of progressive value or progressive idea they are pushing for, and they make sure that those specific candidates and politicians keep pushing for them, and they hold them to that. And then those politicians and candidates also hold the people that they're challenging in like primaries, which they run in primaries. Obviously, they challenge those politicians to follow those kind of policies and those ideas, and if they don't, then they get primaried. So they're pretty much in danger if they don't support Medicare for all, free college, ending the wars, living wage, all the stuff, all the stuff I mentioned. So as I said, there was a brouhaha, and there was a little bit of a thing that went down between those two sides, between the establishment Democrats and Justice Democrats, and it was profiled in a piece by Politico. So the title of the article is "Do Not Tweet," in quotes. Pelosi scolds progressives in closed-door meeting. And the subheadline says, the House Speaker urged liberal Democrats not to criticize their centrist colleagues in public. So basically on social media and I guess in speeches and stuff. So obviously that's what she meant by "do not tweet." So basically, Pelosi lobbed her threat, from the outset, and I'm going to read you some of the parts here that details exactly what her threats were. So it says, Speaker Nancy Pelosi chided progressives in a closed-door meeting Wednesday, calling on them to address their intra-party grievances privately rather than blasting their centrist colleagues on Twitter. Pelosi's comments, which were described as stern, came during the first full caucus meeting since a major blow-up over emergency border funding last month between progressive and moderate lawmakers, as well as a recent spat with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, and her freshman allies. So again, you got a complaint. This is quoting Pelosi. So again, you got a complaint. You come and talk to me about it, Pelosi told Democrats, according to a source in the room. Quoting her again, but do not tweet about our members and expect us to think that and to think that that is just okay. Democrats in the room said they interpreted that remark in part as a shot at Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin and co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who called moderate Democrats members of the, quote, Child Abuse Caucus in a tweet over their support for the Senate's version of the emergency humanitarian package. Pelosi also indirectly criticized Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff, according to Democrats in the room, as she told members to tell their staffers to, quote, think twice before they tweet. Saikat Chakrabarti, Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff, went after Pelosi in a series of tweets over the weekend, criticizing everything from her comments on the squad to her stance against impeachment. Chakrabarti also tweeted scathing criticism of the Blue Dogs, which is the Blue Dog Democrats, calling them the new Southern Democrats. Quoting Chakrabarti here, it says, they certainly seem hell-bent to do black and brown people today what the old Southern Democrats did in the 1940s, Chakrabarti wrote on Twitter before deleting the post. Her remarks also come after Pelosi dismissed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the other members of the Progressive Squad in an interview with the New York Times over the weekend. Pelosi questioned the group's actual influence, given that its members were the only 4 Democrats who opposed the House's original humanitarian package. Ocasio-Cortez and the other progressives, Representatives Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, quickly fired back, criticizing Pelosi's remarks in a series of tweets. So this is the part of the article where it profiles those progressives fighting back. So it says, some of the moderates who felt targeted by Pocan's tweet also spoke up in the caucus meeting, including Abigail Spanberger of Virginia, who belongs to the Problem Solvers Caucus that Pocan derided as child abusers. As a former federal law enforcement agent who focused on child trafficking, Spanberger said she was horrified that a fellow Democrat would compare members of his own party to child abusers, according to multiple people in the room. Speaking to reporters later Wednesday, Pocan did not back away from his criticism of the bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, which had taken credit for helping scrap the House's more liberal version of a humanitarian border package last month. Quoting Pocan here, it says, I know there are some people in the Problem Solvers Caucus that feel a little stung because they got yelled at last weekend by constituents. Pocan said, referring to recent town hall meetings held by moderates in their districts. I understand why they're upset, but they should be upset because they got in trouble last week. And then this is kind of profiling why the Democrats buckled. So it says Pelosi's speech is part of an effort by Democratic leaders to knit the party back together after the bitter border funding fight last month. Shortly before the July 4th recess, moderate Democrats moved to block further consideration of the House border bill, which had additional protections for migrant children. After it became clear the GOP-controlled Senate would not take it up, Pelosi bowed to centrists and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell agreeing to put the Senate bill on the floor and leaving progressives fuming. And then here it profiles how one of the members of Congress was preaching unity. So it says House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Democrat of Maryland, also delivered a forceful speech on Wednesday, preaching unity within the caucus and urging members to speak directly with each other rather than publicly. A sentiment that lawmakers privately mused could also have been directed at Pelosi after her critique of the caucus's freshman firebrands. And then there's a last part here where it talks about, it's the last short little paragraph here talking about how the progressives revolt. And it says some progressive members had privately discussed not paying dues to the caucus's fundraising arm earlier this year after officials announced contentious new policies that made it tougher for primary challengers to attract talented consultants. So this is a very interesting little feud going on here, and I think it's a long time coming. This is something that should have happened, honestly, from the very beginning. You know, as far as the kind of progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which, to be fair, isn't very big, but it's still very influential. They should have gone after Pelosi a hell of a lot harder. Now, to the credit of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she did, for example, after she was elected and won her race in Queens and the Bronx. She went to Nancy Pelosi's office with a bunch of members of the Sunrise Movement. Now, the Sunrise Movement is a group that's headed by, I believe it's a bunch of women who are fighting against the effects of climate change. So they're pushing for the most progressive climate change legislation possible, and they go to the offices of random Democrat, not too many. I don't think they've gone to a lot of Republican Party politicians' offices, but they definitely go to a lot of Democratic politicians' offices, and they demand that these politicians vote better on legislation that is going to help, hopefully, reverse climate change. Now, the reason why they don't go to the Republican Party politicians' offices is because they know that a lot of those Republicans are going to be they're going to be against reversing climate change and at least doing something to avoid it, because they already are bought out by the oil industry and any kind of any industry that's going to basically fuck up the environment. And they don't even bother with the Republicans, and I don't blame them. Now, when it comes to the Democrats, there's a possibility that you can sway them. You can tell them, listen, this is for example, I think they went to the office of Dianne Feinstein one time. California is a big state. You want to go in there, you want to stop fracking, you want to stop, oil drilling and all that stuff. I've gone, I live in California, and I've gone through different parts of the state where I've seen oil drilling and I've seen fracking happening. And that's something that can be stopped. In fact, I remember the old neighborhood that I grew up in when I was little was in LA. It was in the valley area of LA, and it was in Northridge. And I lived there for about, I would say, roughly 10 years of my life, I would say. And when I left, years later, and then I left and I moved to the Bay Area up north in Northern California. Later on, my mom told me that they started doing fracking. They started doing fracking in that area, that specific area of Northridge, and they were fracking, and it was causing a lot of environmental problems. So this is something, and that angered me, and this is something I totally understand. Like I said, I've seen it happen, just like the example I just gave regarding Northridge. I've seen it when traveling through California, going between Northern California and Southern California by car. So this kind of stuff, when it comes to the whole kind of oil drilling, digging for oil as much as possible. That kind of stuff is happening all over the country. But when it's happening in your own state, in your own areas, and where you used to live, or maybe even where you do live, it's something that really angers you, and you want to speak out against it. So, but when it comes to these politicians, they're so comfortable in their seats, in their positions, in their seats in Congress or seats in the Senate, wherever they are, let alone the president and all that stuff. But they are so comfortable where they are, they don't get challenged by anybody. Nobody calls them out for anything. Nobody says, this is what you should do to represent your constituents, because they're too beholden to their donors. So finally somebody is calling them out, and, Pelosi's getting pissed off that they're doing it publicly. Oh my God, God forbid, you call us out publicly and you tweet about it. And this is all about like the Democrats trying to avoid having any kind of issues that's going to affect 2020 when Trump has to obviously run against whoever the Democrat is. And obviously they don't want the Democrat to be Bernie Sanders, which if it does end up being Bernie Sanders, they're going to have to back him. They're going to have to support him as the candidate ultimately. But, let's just say if it's going to be somebody like, Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or, Pete Buttigieg or whoever, even Elizabeth Warren, these are candidates that a lot of progressives that don't want to support, majority of progressives. And I'd say like 80, 90% of progressives, they don't want to support those people, even, at least. So that becomes a problem for Democrats who have to go out there and they have to play, they basically have to, play damage control. And they definitely know that these progressives in the caucus, in the Democratic caucus, like Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and all these people, they are backed by Justice Democrats, and they're making big demands, and they're making revolutionary demands that it's going to have a huge effect on the direction of the party and the direction of the country, really. And they're scared of it. They can't. They're scared of that these so-called these so-called purists, politicians and Democrats, progressives, or whatever that have purity tests, God forbid. That's apparently a terrible thing nowadays, and they hate that they have that, so they have to nip that in the bud and make sure there is no purity in the party. You can't, God forbid you stand up for something too hard, and they want to avoid that. They want to avoid that disaster as much as possible. So it's very, very good to see that Nancy Pelosi is scared. It's very good to see that she is. Well, I'm definitely not happy that she's taking, trying to take control and trying to appease progressives, because she's ultimately just doing whatever her donors tell her what to do and what her Democratic strategists. Ultimately, her intention is just to kind of throw a bone to progressives and be nice to them, and then eventually stab them in the back. Because as it was mentioned in the article, there was a New York Times profile that was done where they basically did like an interview with Nancy Pelosi, and so and I'll post the link in the description. You can check out the article from the New York Times. But they basically they're talking to her, and Pelosi tells them, oh yeah, these four women that are in the in the Democratic Party, and then they were just newly elected and brought into Congress. Don't worry about them. They're not that big of a deal. Don't let them get to you too. Don't let them get too much attention. They don't get to other Democrats. They're just four people. Who cares? And that's referring to Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and who's the other one? I lost track of who the other one was. It is Rashida Tlaib. I'm sorry. So Rashida Tlaib is from Michigan, Ilhan Omar is from Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley is from Massachusetts, and as I said, Ocasio-Cortez is from New York. And those four are being a thorn in the side to Nancy Pelosi, and she's going out there and she's kind of, she's going like this, she's like, who cares? They're not important. Who cares about them? They're just four women. Their votes don't mean anything. They don't represent the party, blah, blah, blah. So she's just shrugging them aside. She's, just kind of flicking at them, making sure they get out of the way, because she causes problems for them, essentially. Causes problems for her and for them in the sense of the establishment Democrats, basically. And she wants to get them out of the way as soon as possible before things get any worse, because she knows things are definitely going to get worse. So this is definitely one of those situations that progressives need to use this. And I'm going to be doing a story in the next segment, which is going to get me very, very angry talking about it. But this is a situation where progressives have to hold their ground. They need to stand up for themselves. Don't let these Democrats bully them. Don't let them appease them, because there was there's this picture of this profile on, I forgot what it was, Rolling Stone, Esquire, or something. It was some sort of magazine cover where it was a picture of Pelosi, Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and I think Ayanna Pressley. Maybe it was Rashida Tlaib. I'm not sure, but these four, or three Justice Democrats with Pelosi took this picture where essentially Pelosi appeased them and, wanted to present herself with these, women of color, one black woman, one Somalian woman, and one Hispanic woman, and all young women too. And she wanted to portray herself as, look at this, I'm a rich white woman, I'm taking a picture putting it on the cover of this whatever magazine it is, and look how nice I am to them. And so now they in her mind, they better kiss my ass now that I'm giving them all this attention, and I'm going on a magazine cover with them, laughing like, we're so happy, we're so best friends. And honestly, this is something Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk talked about. They should have never done that. They should have never done that magazine cover. I'm sure there was an article with it too where they're talking about, oh, we're going to work together and shit. I haven't read it, so I don't know. But I'm sure they did that too. But, like Kyle said, they should have never done that, because all it did is made Pelosi look good. And it gave her this, gave this kind of this reputation of being like, oh, I'm so inclusive, and I'm in favor of letting, women of color into my little circle of trust and making sure they're taken care of. In reality, she doesn't give a shit about them. She doesn't give a shit about, their demands, whether, no matter what they're demanding for their progressive policies and stuff. Pelosi doesn't want to do shit about that, because she's the leader and she's the Speaker of the House, and she wants to do what she wants to do. And that's, fulfilling the demands of her donors. That's all she cares about. And if you dare stray away from that, then she knows what the consequences will be. And it'll basically be financial. It may not be political, but it's, especially considering she's from San Francisco, but it's going to be much more financial than political, because I guarantee you majority of the people in San Francisco are going to support all those progressive policies, let alone the state of California. People in the state of California are going to support progressive policies, but not if Pelosi is going out there and saying, no, we need to do something more pragmatic. Then they're going to just back whatever she says, which just shows how stupid some people are. They just want to be part of a team, and they want to be, following along with that instead of doing what's, good for the country. So this next segment is going to be something, is going to be along the same lines of what we were just talking about in the last segment, but this is much more specifically targeted towards, so it's involving the Justice Democrats, but it's also, it's not just between Justice Democrats and like establishment Democrats. Now, to be fair, the ones that they're facing off against here are in my opinion, and in the opinion of many progressives and Justice Dem supporters, are the establishment. But these are black lawmakers. These are members of the Congressional Black Caucus, for short, they're CBC. And this is a group of people, I don't know how many people it is, maybe it's 50 to 100 people probably. I think all of them, or most of them are, certainly all of them, maybe except one or two maybe, are Democrats. Two of them, one or two of them, I think, are black members of Congress. I could be wrong on that though. But yeah, like 90-something% of them, 95% of them are Democrats. And these are all people that are beholden to in my opinion, they're not, I wouldn't say they're totally, like, they're not right-wing Democrats, but a lot of them are beholden to corporate interests. And I was actually reading I think there was an article that somebody posted on Twitter. I was interacting with a couple of people on there, and somebody posted something about how these specific, CBC members, Congressional Black Caucus members, they they started to like slowly over the years, they started giving in more to like the corporate demands of like, you know, corporate interests, essentially, so big donors. And they slowly but surely, these corporate donors started to like give them money, kind of, you know, started throwing them a bone, more of a bone, you know, bigger bone, you know. So like they kept, you know, trying to appease these black lawmakers more and more in the promises that like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna, you know, do this even if you know, support this, let's say, progressive policy. But then, obviously, after they managed to get them on the payroll, essentially, and bribe them, they obviously started to say, like, okay, if you're not going to support what we're expecting you to support, we're not going to give you money anymore. So I'm sure the black lawmakers kept making their policies appease to their interests and to their demands, and becoming much more right-wing instead of more populist and left-wing. So there's an article here in The Hill, and the title of the article is CBC Lawmakers Rip Justice Democrats for Targeting Black Lawmakers for Primaries. So the CBC got really pissed at the Justice Dems for primarying them. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here, a few paragraphs here talking about that and kind of going into detail of what several members, some named, some unnamed, and the unnamed ones, the unnamed people that made comments definitely pissed me off. But we'll get to that in a bit. But let me read this, this part of the article here, or all the parts of the article that are relevant to this topic here. So check it out. It says, Congressional Black Caucus members are furious at Justice Democrats accusing the outside progressive group aligned with Firebrand Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of trying to oust lawmakers of color, specifically African-American lawmakers. Justice Democrats is backing primary challengers to 8-term Representative Henry Cuellar, Democrat of Texas, a Hispanic caucus member, and 10-term Representative WM. What is WM? Anyway, his name is Lacy Clay, Representative Lacy Clay, and he is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, the same one we're discussing here. CBC. And it says the insurgent group has also made noise this year about challenging Democratic Caucus Chairman Hakeem Jeffries, a CBC member seen as the heir apparent to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. By the way, the last heir apparent to Speaker Nancy Pelosi was Joe Crowley, who ironically got beat by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And Democrats in the establishment, even a lot of CBC Democrats, I would say, are very pissed off that she beat Joe Crowley, because he was the next guy in line. But at the end of the day, it's just like any kind of monster. You cut off the head, another head is going to grow, and they're just going to put somebody else in its place. And apparently that's Hakeem Jeffries, who, by the way, is a big shill to the Israeli lobby and corporate donors and stuff. So he's got his own issues aside from just being a black dude. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. Just like it didn't mean anything for Barack Obama, by the way. So continuing on here, it says, and CBC leaders are fretting that Justice Democrats may target other black lawmakers in the coming weeks and months, including Representatives Yvette Clarke, Joyce Beatty. So Yvette Clarke's from New York, Joyce Beatty is from Ohio, Emmanuel Cleaver from Missouri, and Anthony Brown from Maryland. Brown said the group has been making calls in his district, actively trying to recruit a challenger to run against him, something that Justice Democrats denies. That's surprising. And then quoting Gregory Meeks here. So this is another guy that I don't think he's being primaried by anybody yet. By anybody from Justice Democrats yet, but he might be at some point. It says, it just seems strange that the social Democrats, I don't know why he's calling them that, seem to be targeting members of the Congressional Black Caucus, individuals who have stood and fought to make sure that African Americans are included and part of this process. Representative Gregory Meeks, a senior CBC member, told The Hill. He's, by the way, from New York, Democrat from New York. He says, I don't know what that agenda is, but if they want to come after members of the Black Caucus, it's two ways. I'm guessing he means it goes both ways, warned Meeks, the Queens Democratic Party boss, who clashed with Justice Democrats in a local district attorney race last month. That's referring to Tiffany Caban. Tiffany Caban is the woman that faced Melinda Katz. Tiffany Caban was supported by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Justice Democrats. Melinda Katz was basically represented by the establishment. And apparently Gregory Meeks, this black lawmaker, decided to support Melinda Katz, who was not a black woman. She is a white woman. And she decided, and she ran for the district attorney seat or role in New York, and I think of Queens, I believe. Yeah, that's what it said, Queens. And he decided to support her, and Ocasio-Cortez supported Tiffany Caban, and that kind of started the little feud, the little beef between Ocasio-Cortez and Meeks. So that's kind of what got things. That's what got things started there. Continuing on here, it says Justice Dems decided to respond to these smears and accusations. So let me read this for you guys here. It says Justice Democrats stormed onto the scene last year when one of their little-known handpicked candidates, Ocasio-Cortez, who is Hispanic, unseated then Representative Joseph Crowley, the powerful Democratic Caucus chairman, in a New York primary. In a statement, Justice Democrats' executive director, Alexandra Rojas, defended the group's strategy, noting that it has endorsed several candidates of color. One of them is Cori Bush, a registered nurse and Black Lives Matter activist, who is taking on Clay, referring to Lacy Clay, for the second time. We are supporting a black woman who is a community organizer who has taken on police brutality in the St. Louis area, Rojas said. 70% of congressional districts in America have no competitive general election. Primaries are often the only places where voters can have a real say. Barack Obama first ran for Congress in a primary challenge to Representative Bobby Rush, a CBC member, Rojas added. This is a democracy and voters deserve choices. Amen. Justice Democrats also pointed out that they endorsed Ayanna Pressley, an African-American woman, in her successful primary challenge last year against Democratic Representative Mike Capuano in a Massachusetts district where minorities make up the majority. This cycle, Justice Democrats is also supporting Bronx educator Jamal Bowman, who is black, as he takes on House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Eliot Engel, who is Jewish, and Jessica Cisneros, a 26-year-old Hispanic woman who is running against her former boss, Cuellar, which is Henry Cuellar from Texas. The CBC's allegations are, quote, absurd and more about protecting incumbency over democracy, a Justice Democrat source said. In the last cycle, Justice Democrats backed American Civil Liberties Union activist Shardo Richardson over Representative Stephanie Murphy, a Democrat of Florida, who made history as the first Vietnamese American woman elected to Congress. The group in 2018 also endorsed Bush, referring to Cori Bush, who eventually lost to Clay by nearly 20 points in the primary. This week, the group said they will back Bush once again as she gives another shot in Missouri. So in this next part, it shows how the CBC members, the Congressional Black Caucus members, suddenly decided to cry racism. And this is where the part of this little feud between the Justice Democrats and the CBC members gets ridiculous and honestly, to me, maddening. So check this out here. It says, in an interview in the Capitol, Clay said it was absolutely clear that Justice Democrats are targeting lawmakers of color like himself. He and his father, Bill Clay, have represented the district for the past 50 years, and Lacy Clay called the group's actions insulting to the intelligence of Missouri voters. Okay, so basically what you're saying, first of all, he's being challenged by a woman of color. So that doesn't make any sense. That's just bullshit to say that Justice Democrats is targeting black members of Congress. But then even if that was the case, they're trying to replace you with a black woman. So how are you targeting, how's that racism and how's that targeting, black lawmakers? You're representing one black lawmaker with another black lawmaker. So it's not like you're representing, it's not like you're replacing him with a white lawmaker or even a Hispanic or Asian or throw out any, ethnicity out there. It's a black woman trying to challenge a black man. But another thing Lacey Clay is saying here is he's saying, oh, well, I got this seat from my father. Basically he was handed that seat by his daddy. By his daddy that decided to retire, and he's like, here's son, here's some nice nepotism here for you. I'll just hand over this seat to you because obviously I did so well, and then I'm gonna obviously endorse my own son, and we have the same last name, so obviously people are gonna vote for you. So he's just like, it's just nepotism. The guy doesn't care about, representing the actual people of his district in, Missouri, right? And he's like, oh, I just took my daddy's seat and, God forbid, how dare you take this seat away from me because it's mine. So anyway, he says here, quoting him, it says, they are going after the wrong target. Instead of fighting Republicans and defeating Trump and holding on to our majority, they find it convenient to go after their own, which is to me a bunch of BS. Ooh, yeah, tough guy over here. And then he says and this is the fucking crazy part. He likened Justice Democrats to, quote, Russian trolls of 2016. Trying to sow divisions in the Democratic Party. And then quoting another CBC member, it says, it does make you wonder what's going on, added another CBC member, Robin Kelly. Some names that have been mentioned all seem to be people of color and more so CBC members, but they're replacing them with other black members, you morons. Ugh. And then it says CBC members and some top Democratic aides have questioned who is pulling the strings at Justice Democrats. These people are absolutely insane. Not only are they crying racism, but they're playing the fucking victim. Like, oh my God, how dare you take part in democracy and challenge our primary seats? How dare you, good sir or good ma'am? You're trying to take my seat away from me because I didn't even fucking earn it. I got it from my daddy, and then you're taking this opportunity away from me. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, receiving money from corporate donors. That's really what he's going to miss. Fucking prick. Anyway. So how did this whole thing start? The article details that a little bit here. Check it out. This is stuff we may have already talked about before, and I may have talked about in the last segment or even last episodes too. So here it talks about how. So it says Justice Democrats spat with the Black Caucus comes amid high racial tensions in the 235-member House Democratic Caucus. Ocasio-Cortez accused Pelosi of singling out, quote, newly elected women of color when the speaker scolded lawmakers in a private meeting Wednesday for tweeting at each other. Pelosi clarified Thursday that her comments were aimed at Chakrabarti, Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff. Who had earlier tweeted that the moderate New Democrats and Blue Dog Coalition should be named the New Southern Democrats. They certainly seem hell-bent to do to black and brown people today what the old Southern Democrats did during the 1940s. Chakrabarti wrote, later deleting the tweet. So I mentioned this in the last segment. But I just want to say one thing, and this is a point that Cenk Uygur of TYT made. He said that the attack from Ocasio-Cortez on, against Nancy Pelosi, so AOC going after Pelosi and saying that this is like a racial thing, and it's like, it's something that, shouldn't be, it should be seen as like as a racist attack. I don't think that was a helpful route to go. And that's what Cenk said. So I'm agreeing with Cenk. But what Cenk said is that, that's not the best way to do it. The best way to frame it is to say this is a political, anti-progressive, essentially, route to go or to essentially call out. So that's the route that the Pelosi and the other Democrats are doing, and that's what you should be fighting. So you should be saying you're fighting against progressive change. You're fighting against progressive populism. The policies out there that are popular among the American people. That's what you're attacking. So it's not a color thing. It's not an ethnicity thing. I don't know, honestly, in my opinion, I don't know if it's an ethnicity thing, but I don't think that helps anything. I think, if anything, it just allows Nancy Pelosi, just like she did with Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, and I think it was Tlaib, or was it Presley, and Ilhan Omar, doing that, like I said in the last segment, where she took that picture on that magazine cover. That's all Pelosi's going to do. She's going to go and hug herself up against all the black lawmakers, whether men or women, and they're going to say, look, how could it be, how could this be like a race thing? I'm totally, like I said in the last segment, I'm totally inclusive, and, I'm Nancy Pelosi. I love all people, blacks, Hispanic, everybody. I love everybody, all colors and races and genders. Doesn't matter what they are. So it's an easy thing for her to counter. So you should have just gone out there and said, no, you're against progressive change. You're not a racist. You're just against progressives. What progressives want. You're fighting against progressives when you shouldn't be. So I just don't think the race angle really helped AOC's cause there, but I don't know. Hopefully the narrative can be shifted over to, talking about how it is fighting against progressive change, and because Pelosi definitely she can't defend that as easily as she can with the whole the race card. So here are more smears against Justice Democrats. It says a senior House Democratic aide called it ironic and funny that Ocasio-Cortez is accusing Pelosi of attacking women of color when Justice Democrats is targeting minority lawmakers. Quoting a top Democratic aide, she's only a woman of color when it's convenient. None of the things she's fought for aligned with communities of color, and her group is funded only by elitist white liberals. She's a puppet. I want to know who the fuck that person is, because that person is just a dick. They're a fucking dick for saying this, behind the guise of an anonymous quote, and then calling them elitist white liberals, and she's a puppet. That's fucked up, man. And it says the aide then texted an image of a Goomba puppet from the Super Mario Brothers video game. I can't tell you how pissed off people are about the Justice Democrats, the aide added. All these CBC members feel like they are under siege, but it's offensive. It's offensive that these elitist white liberals feel like they can undermine the foundation of our party, African American voters. Dude, one of the fucking candidates. Two of them. Ilhan Omar is black. She's Somalian, but she's black. And Ayanna Pressley is African American. She's black too. Two of the fucking members are black. So when you're talking about these elitist white liberals, that's ridiculous. It makes no sense. I mean, Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley are both black women. They are both black women that are running against or that are part of the Justice Democrats, Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar, both black women. Now, Ayanna Pressley, she beat Mike Capone. I don't know. I guess maybe he was a white man, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure. So based on his name, I can't tell if he's white or maybe he's Hispanic. But whatever he is, he wasn't black. And she defeated him. That's a black woman. Ilhan Omar, I don't know who she defeated, but she won her race, and she's a black woman too. So when you're talking about these people being elitist white liberals, you can call anybody a puppet. A puppet is whatever. But that's bullshit too. But I mean, that's putting aside the puppet remark, because that's just stupid and childish. Calling them elitist white liberals is just ridiculous and offensive. And it's pathetic that you would say that when you know that the candidates that are part of the Justice Democrats are not just white liberals, and the main ones that are well known are not white liberals at all. Now, maybe a couple of the people that founded Justice Democrats. So in regard to Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk, who, yes, he's a white man, okay, but he's got progressive ideas, so he's a progressive. And then, Cenk Uygur is from, he's Turkish. He was born in Turkey. He's an immigrant from Turkey. Saikat Chakrabarti, he was a former Bernie Sanders operative. He's, I believe he's of I forgot where SciCat is from, but I'll have to look that up though. If you guys want to check, you want to fact check me on that. But I know he's definitely a man of color. He's an individual of color. He obviously has some sort of background that is not from the United States, which is perfectly fine. The point is that the Justice Democrats, they're a diverse coalition. Their candidates that they represent are diverse. So all this bullshit about people being about how the white liberals are taking over with among Justice Democrats, it's complete bullshit, and it's really offensive because they're just making shit up and just lying. So when they're the ones that are offended by these so-called elite white liberals, you're the ones who are just projecting. Well, you're not projecting, but you're just making things up essentially. But in reality, you're the ones who are beholden to elitist white liberals like Nancy Pelosi, basically, and Joseph Crowley, who was beat by a woman of color in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Those are the people that you were sucking up to. But then you're talking about Justice Democrats sucking up to elitist white liberals? Get the fuck out of here. Fucking people are fucking assholes, man. I can't stand it. Anyway, so the next part of the article here, specifically the Hill article, because I have another one that I was going to go over, but the Hill article talks about how the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, wants to have a meeting. So it says here, top CBC member Meeks, referring to Gregory Meeks, now is calling for a meeting between CBC leaders and Justice Democrats to find out why they are targeting lawmakers of color. We will have to at some point sit down and see, is this something that is directed at members of the Congressional Black Caucus? Meeks asked. We are going to sit down with whomever the social Dems are. We have to find out who they are, who is really running this show. We have to figure that out. Dude is like fucking paranoid as hell. He must think it's like Russian bots, Russian operatives or something. And then it says, Representative Donald McKeon, a CBC member, said it was upsetting that Justice Democrats appear to be taking aim at so many black lawmakers, especially since they have some of the most progressive voting records in the caucus. Yeah, please name one fucking progressive idea that you have. Oh, you're not anti-gay, and you believe in Obamacare. It says, I think challenging other Democrats in the primary when we're trying to hold on to the majority is wrong, unless the person is so far out of bounds, so far away from Democratic orthodoxy. But that's not what's going on here, McEachin told The Hill. It's disturbing to see challenges to that many CBC members. But see, dude, that's what you don't get. It's not about the Democratic orthodoxy. Nobody gives a fuck about the Democratic orthodoxy. It's about the orthodoxy of progressive ideas. So see, 1 second he said progressive, 1 second he says democratic. So you don't know, because that's the thing. He thinks progressives are Democrats. Because, Donald Trump is in office and the Republican Party is so far right, that means that we're progressives. No, you're not. You're not fucking progressives. Don't even fucking use that word. These pathetic Democrats in that party, they have hijacked that term. So many, not just the Democrats in the party, but just random activists that support the party have hijacked the progressive label and used it for themselves, even when they're not progressive. All these people like to call themselves progressive, and they're not. I'm a progressive. Kyle Kalinske is a progressive. To some extent, TYT, Cenk Uygur, he's a progressive. Those are Tulsi Gabbard, that's a progressive. Don't tell me that progressives are a bunch of people that are just because they're black and they supported Obama and they thought Obama was a fucking, he was a fucking progressive, and he's progressive because I don't even know why the fuck they say he's progressive, but anyway, whatever it is, all the stupid ass reasons that they give. And don't tell me you're progressive just for those stupid things because you like Obamacare. Obamacare wasn't progressive. Obamacare was a stupid, former policy that was pushed by the Republican Party during the 1990s. It was initially put together, it was put on the platform of Richard Nixon when he was president. It was crafted by the Heritage Foundation. It was put into law by Mitt Romney when he was governor of Massachusetts. Mitt Romney, the guy that ran against Obama in 2012. You're taking his policy and you're calling that progressive. And then you're gloating about passing that policy policy as if it's so wonderful and it's so progressive. Yeah, you're fucking delusional. You don't know what a progressive is, and just stay the fuck away from that label, please. So I wanted to read one more article, one more parts of an article here. It's just more details about the kind of CBC, Congressional Black Caucus versus Justice Democrats rift. And this is an article from the Daily News. It says, they had a conversation with Gregory Meeks, the same guy I quoted before. It says, Representative Gregory Meeks lobs veiled primary threat against Ocasio-Cortez amid, quote, intolerable feud with Democratic leadership. Excuse me. It says, in an interview with the Daily News, Meeks fumed over Ocasio-Cortez's recent racial beef with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and pushed back against her left-wing allies at Justice Democrats for openly backing insurgent candidates, trying to unseat members of the Congressional Black Caucus. He says, it says, Meeks stressed there weren't any current plans to challenge Ocasio-Cortez, but left the door open. If you get in the ring, expect that people are going to start throwing punches. Do you really want to use a punching reference when referring to a woman that you want to challenge? You really want to use that analogy? Not very smart. But anyway, so here's more from CBC's Meeks. It says, Meeks could also become a target for using his role as Queen's Democratic Party chair to back establishment favorite Melinda Katz over leftist Tiffany Caban in the borough's still undecided district attorney race, which has become a microcosm of the national intra-party battle. I mentioned that earlier. Tiffany Caban and Melinda Katz. And I'm surprised the race is still going on. Hopefully Caban can pull it off. It says, Meeks said that the Justice Democrats and left-leaning lawmakers may be shooting the party in the foot. I would hope that these individuals would realize who the opposition is here, Meeks said, referring to Republicans. The focus should be to keep the majority, grow the majority, and win the presidency. No, that's not the goal. The goal is not to keep the majority, grow the majority. That's not the only fucking goal, dude. You're delusional. The goal is to get progressive candidates in those seats, in your seat, the actual progressives, the ones that support policies that are actually progressive, not just progressive in name only, and things that help regular people, that help the American people who are suffering, whether they have shitty quality healthcare, whether they, want to go to school and they want to have, free college, they're drowning in student debt, they're working for, a shitty low minimum wage. They want to, work at a living wage or even a $15 minimum wage, which still wouldn't be enough, but would be better. Ending the wars. I don't know. Are you doing anything regarding that, Gregory Meeks? Are you doing anything to end wars, get higher wages, get free college for Americans, get people out of student loan debt, to get better quality health care? No, I doubt it. You're just talking about Obamacare. You just care about Obamacare. And then here's another anonymous source smearing progressives and Justice Democrats. Quoting the anonymous source, it says, Justice Democrats in general are trust fund kids who are funding this with their parents' money. The fuck does that come from? It says the source said, blasting the progressive group as elitist for criticizing black lawmakers from poor districts who take corporate donations. It's offensive for CBC members when these elites are looking down on them when they don't have the financial ability to say, I don't want that money. The hell is he talking about? As for an example, the source pointed to Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff and Justice Democrats co-founder, Saikat Chakrabarti, a millionaire Harvard graduate who worked on Wall Street before turning to left-wing politics. First of all, let me just stop it right there. How do you know what Chakrabarti believes in? How do you know, maybe Chakrabarti had to go, he's stuck in student loan debt. Maybe he has, millions of dollars of student loan debt. Maybe, how do you know if his parents funded him to go to school? So when you're talking about, trust fund babies and elites and stuff, all of a sudden these people that are pushing for progressive policies, all of a sudden, like Saikat Chakrabarti and, Kyle Kulinski, Cenk Uygur, all of a sudden these people are the elites, but you people aren't. The CBC is bankrolled by corporate interests. Hakeem Jeffries, who is the basically the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, he is corporate funded. He is receiving money from corporate donors. So don't tell me about how the Justice Democrats who are pushing for all the progressive policies that are popular that I've mentioned a million times already in this segment. Don't tell me those people are the elitists. You're the fucking elitists. And it says a spokesman for Ocasio-Cortez declined to comment Friday, but the Justice Democrats took aim at the party establishment on her behalf. Quoting a statement here, it says senior members of the Democratic Party can make whatever false claims they want, but it's clear that their bottom line is no primary challenges. Justice Democrats board members Alexandra Rojas, Demond Drummer, and Nassim Thompson said in a joint statement. And then this is quoting a tweet from Walid Shahid, who is a communications director for Justice Democrats, somebody I follow on Twitter. Many people also follow on Twitter. He also makes a lot of appearances on MSNBC too, by the way, which is good. And he, defends Bernie and AOC and everybody. So he responded in a tweet. So the part that says that the Justice Democrats are trust fund babies and shit, or kids, whatever, it says here, AOC was a bartender, so referring to Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Ilhan Omar was a refugee. Rashida Tlaib had to raise her siblings. Ayanna Pressley dropped out of college to support her mom who lost her job. Don't do this just to defend the fact that you want to take corporate donations. Exactly. So you're hiding behind a fucking anonymous source, and you're calling everybody elitists, and then in reality you're the fucking elites. And then for the little nice cherry on top, guess who supported Nancy Pelosi in this whole feud? Because Pelosi obviously is on the side of the CBC and defending them and defending establishment Democrats against the Justice Democrats. President Trump came out in defense of Nancy Pelosi, of all people. And then this is quoting Trump. It says, I think Cortez, not even saying Ocasio-Cortez, I think Cortez is being very disrespectful to somebody who's been there a long time, Trump said, cutting off the first half of the Congresswoman's last name. I deal with Nancy Pelosi a lot, and we go back and forth, and it's fine. But I think that a group of people is being very disrespectful to her, and you know what? I don't think that Nancy can let that go on. So look at this. You got Donald Trump, the guy who is hated by every single Democrat, essentially, by every single so-called liberal Democrat, so-called fake progressive Democrat. Every single one of those guys every one of those people hate Donald Trump, and look what Donald Trump is doing. He's defending their queen, their Madam Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and saying like, oh, how dare you, what, I don't know, he said, you're being disrespectful to her. I think he even said at one point that she's not a racist or something, which, okay, fine. Maybe Nancy Pelosi is a racist. I don't know. Maybe Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez maybe went a little bit far in saying that. But I mean, I do believe that I think Pelosi does have a lot of tendencies where she doesn't show that she cares for black people. But I don't know if she's actually a racist. But especially since Trump is the actual racist. But anyway, but like, how ironic is it that Trump is the one who has to come out and defend Pelosi? And meanwhile, Democrats still fucking hate him, but he's coming out there and defending him because he wants to maintain the status quo of the party so that obviously the strong populist ideas don't get any attention, God forbid, because we can't have that. If you have that, then the Republicans are fucked over. They know that, even though they talk about socialism and communism, but they know that shit is very popular among people that are suffering right now, so they have to try and maintain the status quo of the centrist establishment policies, basically. So yeah, please, Trump, keep defending Nancy Pelosi. We'd love for you to do that, because that only makes her look worse. So Bernie Sanders came out recently and he gave people, he kind of released this thing called an anti-endorsement list. And he basically listed all the people that he is proud that do not endorse him and do not support him. And he basically stuck it to them and said, yeah, fuck you guys. You know, you guys don't want me as president, so that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to put your name on a list, and I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that you despise me and you hate me and you don't want me to become president. So this is an article from Common Dreams. It's written by Jake Johnson, who's a great writer for that publication. And I've read articles from him several times before on other podcasts. The quote, this is quoting part of what Bernie says. He says, "We welcome their hatred." And this is part of the title. It says, "We welcome their hatred. Sanders unveils anti-endorsement list of billionaire CEOs and Wall Street bankers." Quoting Bernie again, it says, "I am proud to announce the modern-day oligarchs who oppose our movement." So Bernie comes out guns blazing here, and let me detail it for you here a little bit. So it says, asking the American people to judge his 2020 Democratic presidential campaign by both its supporters and its powerful enemies, Senator Bernie Sanders on Wednesday unveiled an anti-endorsement list consisting of prominent billionaires, Wall Street bankers, and corporate CEOs who have attacked his candidacy and policies. "You can tell who is truly fighting for working families by the enemies they make, and we've made a lot of enemies," Sanders said in a statement. "We understand that nothing will fundamentally change for working Americans unless we have the guts to take on the most powerful corporate interests in this country. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that corporate CEOs and billionaires have united against our movement," Sanders added. "These people have a vested interest in preserving the status quo so they can keep their grip on power, so they can continue to exploit working people across America. We welcome their hatred." It says, so who's on the list? So the Sanders campaign lists the Vermont Senator's anti-endorsements on a new webpage. The page includes billionaire Democratic mega donor Haim Saban, who attacked Sanders as a disaster zone, quote unquote, in an interview published Wednesday. By the way, Haim Saban he says his one main issue is Israel, and he supported Hillary Clinton when she ran for president in 2016 too, by the way. Says the rest of the list consists of billionaire Home Depot co-founder Kenneth Langone, former CKE restaurant CEO Andy Puzder, former Verizon CEO Lowell McAdam, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, Disney CEO Bob Iger, former General Electric CEO Jeffrey Immelt, former Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein, who was also a big Hillary Clinton fan, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who is somebody that Bernie Sanders has called out several times during committee hearings when Alan Greenspan was the head of the Federal Reserve under, I think it was George W. Bush. Or was it Clinton? I think it was Clinton and Bush. Yeah, it was definitely Bush, for sure. I remember that. Centrist think tank Third Way, which is another group that Bernie has tussled with recently, calling out, I think, the head of Third Way, I believe, is Jim Cowan, I believe it is. Former Goldman Sachs partner Leon Cooperman, Home Depot co-founder Bernard Marcus, and billionaire hedge fund manager Stanley Drunken Miller. And then in this next part here, Bernie quotes FDR. Quote, "As we fight for an agenda that guarantees basic human rights for all Americans, we will be opposed by the most powerful forces in America," Sanders wrote on his website. "I am proud to announce the modern-day oligarchs who oppose our movement. In the words of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred. We will overcome their greed," said Sanders, "and create an economy and a government that works for all, not just the 1%. So that's peak Bernie, man. That is a boss move right there. You don't get any more, balls to the wall than that. I mean, maybe this is something that Donald Trump would do, this kind of shit, but like this is not something you see from anybody on the left. Nobody goes out there and posts the names, a whole list, a whole fucking laundry list of all the people that are CEOs and corporate executives that do not support you. Because if anything, a lot of times, and this is the typical kind of conventional wisdom of the establishment, and whether it's Republicans or Democrats, well, I would say more Democrats, is they want to appease, no, it's Republicans too, for sure. They want to appease the corporate interests as much as possible. They want to get along to get along. They want to go along to get along as much as possible. They want to make sure that they're loved by these people that are giving them piles of cash, and they're giving them all these, all this different, variations of amounts of money and, donor money and fundraisers and all this stuff. They have to suck up to these people as much as possible, because if they don't, then oops, my campaign coffers aren't filled, my pockets aren't lined, they got nothing in their pants pockets, there's nothing there, and they're broke in their mind. At least they're not really. I mean, at the end of the day, you are getting donations from regular people like you and me, but they don't see. That's the thing, like I've said before, they don't care about the donations that they're getting from you and me, if they do. So if somebody, like just any regular, I'm saying me, I'm saying me or my viewers, but I'm saying like regular people out there that donate to these different candidates, they don't care about that money. They only use those numbers these days because they have to respond to Bernie Sanders, who actually has donors that are from progressives like you and me, hopefully the progressives that are watching my show. And those are the people that Bernie Sanders loves to get, endorsed, loves to get, donor money from, loves to get, donations from, and become, have those, he wants to have those people as supporters. He doesn't want to have supporters that are, these corporate CEOs and the heads of Goldman Sachs and the heads of Disney and, fucking JP Morgan Chase and all that stuff. He doesn't need that. Like, he has zero interest in being in bed with those people because he knows it's going to compromise him. Because if he gets their money and he gets their support, then he has to do favors for them. So he doesn't want to deal with those kind of people. And Bernie is the only person out there that I know, at least the only person that's running for president that I know, that would go out there and just call these people out. He would just call their bluff and be like, yeah, here, fuck you. I'm going to call your name out. You're going to, you're going to be embarrassed by, basically being made to look like a fool. And you're also going to get your fucking taxes raised to, a marginal rate of 70%, which is going to make you shit your pants. God forbid. You can't have that. And that's not something you like, but that's too bad. And if you're going to hate me more for it, then hate me more. Keep giving money to my opponents and keep making them puppets to your corporate demands. Because I'm definitely not going to do that. Me, Bernie Sanders, no. I'm taking the demands. I'm giving into the demands of the regular people out there. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there. Jane and Mary and whatever. Those are the people that I'm going to serve, because those are the people that are the ones suffering. You people aren't suffering. You people are doing wonderfully. You're making billions and millions of dollars. You're not even paying your workers decently. I mean, remember, Bernie Sanders was the person who went to the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. I don't think Jeff Bezos hates Bernie Sanders because he didn't put him on the list. So I don't think Bezos has said anything against Bernie Sanders, but definitely his publication, which is Washington Post, which is owned by Bezos, they're constantly going after Bernie. So if Bezos hates Bernie, he's just not making it well known. He's not making it well known out in the public, but he definitely hates Bernie, no doubt about it. And you can see it from how much Washington Post goes after Bernie. But you have to remember that Bernie Sanders was the person that went, to Amazon. He told Amazon, even Disney was the same thing. He told Amazon, the head of Amazon and Disney. The head of Disney is Bob Iger. The head of Amazon, like I said, it's Jeff Bezos. He went to these people. He told them, you better pay your workers a $15 minimum wage. You better do it, or I'm going to keep railing against you. And then what did he do? He went and met with the workers. He went and talked to people. He told them to essentially picket and, protest and demand that they get paid a higher minimum wage, because they were probably getting paid somewhere in the $10 range, maybe even lower. And they didn't like that. And those workers they're treated like shit, especially, I don't know, I don't have the details on how Disney workers are treated. I'm sure they're not treated well. I mean, I've gone to Disneyland and I've seen that, all the time they spend is, being on their feet and dealing with people all day. So it can't be a fun job. And they definitely deserve more than a $15 minimum wage. And as it does the Amazon workers. When it comes to the Amazon workers, they're working in these warehouses, these Amazon warehouses, where apparently they're basically treated like slaves. It's crazy. When I think I had told this story before, but one of my last jobs that I had, I spoke to somebody, and I met somebody there that was working with me, and we were just having a casual conversation. What have you done for work, and what, where do you live, and stuff. Just casual conversation. He was, we started talking about, where did you used to work, and he told me, yeah, I used to be an Amazon worker, and then I would deliver Amazon packages, and he told me they treat us like slaves. They put a tracking device thing on your wrist or something, and they track where you go, and then you can't leave a certain area in the warehouse. You can't be on break that long. They monitor everything you're doing. That's crazy. I mean, that is just nuts. And to think that that's the kind of stuff that they're doing to their workers while paying them shit, let alone paying them $15 an hour, is just maddening. That is absurd. And Bernie Sanders called them out. He said, how dare you do that? I'm standing up for these people because these people are suffering. They don't deserve to be treated like this. This is not the way you treat human beings, let alone your workers. So I'm going to call you out, and I'm going to make sure that you pay your workers more. You pay them a decent wage. You hopefully treat them with respect, and you treat them the way they should be treated, instead of like animals, basically. And eventually Jeff Bezos, he gave in, and he, in fact, if I remember correctly, he basically came out and did a what's the term? He kind of gave in. He said, okay, I give up. And he surrendered. And he said, yeah, thank you, Bernie Sanders. Thank you for pushing for this. I really appreciate it. So, because he didn't want to go out there and attack Bernie Sanders or, go against the idea. So he just gave in, he surrendered. And I think it's something like, 35,000 or 25,000, 30,000, somewhere between 25 and 35,000, I think, workers ended up receiving higher wages, $15 minimum wage. Hopefully that's the case. There isn't any kind of funny business going on there, hopefully, but that's great. And Bernie Sanders is responsible for that. So, if people want to attack him, if people want to attack Bernie Sanders, see, Bezos was smart, but if all these other people want to attack Bernie Sanders and smear him and call him a socialist and communist and all that stuff, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. It's a lie, obviously, and he can answer accordingly. But at the same time, you're only doing that because you're scared. You're scared of what Bernie Sanders can do as president, and he's going to hold your ass to the fire, and you can't stand that. And everybody that supports Bernie appreciates what he does, and hopefully, in November 2020, he becomes president, and he starts cracking some skulls, and he starts, sticking the boot in the neck of these motherfuckers, and holding them accountable to do what they should have been doing years ago, and that's paying their work, treating their workers right, paying them the right wages, and also paying their taxes, not skirting any tax laws, and putting their money in the Cayman Islands and offshore tax havens and everything. That shit is over with if Bernie Sanders is president, and he doesn't give a shit. If they can lob all the different attacks at him that they want, but Bernie's going to fight even harder the more they fight back against him. So some of you may have heard of Netroots Nation. So Netroots Nation is from what I remember back in the day, it used to be a progressive conference that a lot of progressives and liberals and people on the left would go to. Kind of like a Politicon, I guess you would say, for progressives, and it was basically like Politicon before Politicon even existed. I don't know when Politicon started. I just went to the my first Politicon last year in October, but I'm not sure how long it's been around for, but for sure, I think it's been, as far as I know, it's been around maybe for 5 years, 4 years, something like that. But Netroots Nation has been around forever, and they used to be pretty decent, and that was when the left wing was actually left wing. And unfortunately, now that it's a lot more neoliberal these days, and as many people know, just overall just anti-Trump, essentially, it's, these kind of conferences and stuff aren't really that great anymore. And the people that seem to appear at the Netroots Nation type events are not people that progressives really care for anymore. And I know I definitely don't. But Bernie Sanders, people like him, still seem to appear. So Bernie Sanders actually decided to not appear at this year's Netroots Nation. And he said that there was like a scheduling conflict or whatever, but apparently one of the main reasons was that one of the moderators was not to his liking, and I definitely don't blame him. So, and I'll get to that in more detail in a second. So the article is from the Daily Beast. It says Bernie Sanders to skip Netroots Nation. Before he committed to attending, his team brought up potential concerns that a moderator might have been biased towards him. So, as I said, it seems that Bernie Sanders actually decided not to go because of its scheduling conflict. But let's get into the details of the article here first. It says, before confirming his attendance at this weekend's Netroots Nation conference in Philadelphia, members of Bernie Sanders' team raised concerns about one of the moderators who would be asking questions at a presidential candidate forum on Saturday, according to two sources who described the conversations to the Daily Beast. The campaign's questions centered on Marcos Melitsas, the founder and publisher of the progressive activist website Daily Kos, who has been publicly critical of the independent firm Vermont. By the way, Daily Kos, another website, not necessarily organization, but a website that is fake faux-aggressive, essentially. Fake progressive, faux-aggressive, whichever term you want to use. But they also used to be pretty big back in the day. But when 2016 rolled around and Bernie challenged Hillary Clinton, Daily Kos became anti-Bernie pretty much 95% of the time. So, because they're like a blog, they're kind of like a blog website type thing where people they have to become like members or like sign up or something, and then they just post blogs. I did it a couple of times. I never really cared for it. But apparently Keith Olbermann, former MSNBC host, he used to be pretty big on there. He was definitely the most prominent member for sure. So, and he was friends with Marcos Melitsas. And but that website sucks now for sure. So it's not it's not a progressive activist network. I don't know any activists that work for Daily Kos. But anyway, it says Sanders will not be able to attend due to scheduling difficulties, though his campaign announced that national co-chair Nina Turner would be there on Friday. So even with the Melitsas kind of attacking Bernie forever. I mean, he's done on many, many occasions. The campaign still decided to respond nicely, even due to Melitsas' past remarks. It says, we have a long and positive relationship with Marcos, Mary, Eric, and the whole Netroots team, an aide to the senator said. We, of course, trusted Marcos' commitment to neutrality, and we confirmed as much to them. Although Bernie's schedule precludes his ability to attend, we wish the organizers and attendees a successful weekend. Sanders' team had gone from a solid no last Friday to just a few days later trying to figure out if they could make the event work. One source involved in the scheduling said the moderator was not a deal breaker. So, okay. It says Melitsas has been critical of Sanders recently, which could have been the impetus for concern. In a recent interview on Meet the Press, he called Sanders divisive. And it says the problem with Bernie Sanders is that he has the same exact message he had 4 years ago. That's what Melitsas said. It was on the same Meet the Press interview. And Bernie Sanders actually responded to Marcos Melitza's comments on MSNBC's Chuck Todd's show. It was not Meet the Press, but it was Meet the Press Daily, MTP Daily. So it was not Meet the Press. Which is Meet the Press is the Sunday show Chuck Todd hosts, and then MTP Daily is the show that's hosted by him on Mondays through Fridays. But anyway, Bernie Sanders, that prompted a response from both Sanders' campaign manager, Faz Shakir, and a tweet from the senator himself that appeared to be a direct reference to the criticism. And this is what Bernie Sanders said in a tweet. It says, "My skeptics often accuse me of being boring, of hammering the same themes. They're probably right. It's never made sense to me that a few people have incredible wealth and power while most have none. Should we ever achieve justice, I promise I'll write some new speeches." Earlier this year, Melitza took issue with Sanders' decision to appear on a Fox News town hall, saying that it showed the senator was not a team player, quote unquote. Even before Sanders launched his second bid for the White House, Melitza was quoted as saying, "I don't see a lot of lasting energy for Bernie." Yeah, I don't think Marcos Melitza knows anything about the reality of the Bernie Sanders momentum, let alone the progressive momentum. He's just a fucking concerned, trolling jackass that has zero credibility. Nobody gives a fuck who he is or cares about what he has to say, other than, like, if he were to say something stupid, people just respond to him and mock him. But nobody takes seriously anything he has to say. Any of his insight and his opinions don't mean shit. So I don't even know why he's brought on MSNBC, but obviously that's because MSNBC is the Democratic Apologist Network, and obviously they're going to bring on all those fucking neoliberal hacks. By the way, after Bernie Sanders refused, or the news came out in this Daily Beast article about Bernie not wanting to attend Netroots Nation, who was it? So Marcos Melitza responded in a tweet by saying, "Bernie Sanders goes on Fox, but he's afraid of me? Sheesh." And then he posted a link to the article. And then another person who I think is affiliated, I think with Daily Kos and Marcos Melitza's, their name just says Fiddler, Fiddler. It's a woman. She says, "So Bernie Sanders is too scared to face Marcos, at Marcos, and the Netroots, but wants to run for president? Okay." And then again, a link to the, same Daily Beast article. By the way, it should be noted, though, and this was ignored, obviously, not surprising. It says, as it says in the article, it said at the very end of the article, that's very convenient. It says, "Sanders is far from the only top-tier candidate to miss the event. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg will not be able to make it, and former Vice President Joe Biden, whose campaign headquarters are in Philadelphia, is not attending either." So even the person that's from Philadelphia is not going to the event that's in Philadelphia. I mean, come on, man. And then Pete Buttigieg, who everybody's fucking in the Democratic Party and among neoliberal centrist circles is fucking fawning over and thinking he's the next big thing, when he's barely even able to run what's going on in his fucking 100,000, town population. He can't even run things there, but he wants to run for president. Everybody's falling over themselves and coming all over themselves, loving this guy. He didn't attend either. But so what do? They put this at the bottom of the article because they don't want to get in. And then the headline, what does the headline say again? It says, "Bernie Sanders to skip Netroots Nation." Why aren't they mentioning Buttigieg and Biden until the very end of the article? Very convenient, isn't it? So that's how these people operate, man. And, somebody like Marcos Melitza, honestly, Bernie shouldn't even respond to that guy. Let people like myself and other people on Twitter respond to them. Luckily, Bernie Sanders doesn't reference him directly, which would be even worse. So don't do that. but he shouldn't even bother, man. Marcos is not a real person. He's not a relevant person at all. Honestly, the guy. So let me just tell you something about Daily Kos. Daily Kos, for those of you who may not know, has not been, as I was saying earlier, it's just a blog that people post articles or whatever, posts and shit on. But it hasn't been relevant in years. Even before even before 2016. Like so during like the Obama years, Daily Kos wasn't that big. It was getting less and less relevant as the years went on. I mean, maybe it was somewhat relevant to some extent in the beginning of Obama's President Obama's term. So his first term, during his first term, the first half of his presidency, maybe it was relevant back then between 2009 and 2013. But since, I would say after 2013 is when it's really started to like just nosedive. The relevancy of Daily Kos is nil. I mean, nobody takes them seriously. The publications that are legitimate out there don't even reference anything that's going on there, and nobody cares what the people have to say on there. It probably didn't help them when Keith Olbermann left. Like I said, Keith Olbermann was posting articles on there. These days, I don't hear anything from Keith Olbermann anymore, so I doubt he's posting political stuff. All I see Keith Olbermann posting these days is it's actually some useful tweets for once, because he's not just like lashing out at Russia Gate and shit. But Olbermann's posting videos of like, I think dogs, like abandoned dogs that are being kind of left on the streets and then adopting them. So he's putting videos about how, well, you should adopt this dog and adopt this dog and that dog, and this is a dog that's been living on the streets, blah blah. So he's actually doing some decent stuff. Before that, though, he was insane. I mean, he was doing, if I remember correctly, Keith Olbermann was doing commentary videos for GQ, I believe it was, and he was posting these rants on GQ.com or something, or GQ's YouTube page or something. You could probably find the rants on YouTube. But he was just going on there and just like fucking just whining and complaining and just going on and on about fucking, oh, Russiagate, oh, Trump is a Putin puppet, and oh, the Russians are coming. He was basically doing his best. I think, honestly, now that I think about it, I think he was doing his best Rachel Maddow impression. Because remember, Keith Olbermann, when he was on MSNBC, his show was right before Rachel Maddow. So Rachel Maddow, so he was the lead into Rachel Maddow's show. Now, Maddow's show was not as popular as Olbermann's, but it was gaining kind of that kind of popular feeling. It was, and obviously it's very popular among, Democrat loyalists and Russiagators, essentially anti-Trump people now. Back then, she was actually much more progressive, and so was Keith. And they were a good, 1-2 punch tandem. Now they don't. And they were friends, but two, by the way, because he promoted her from Air America onto MSNBC, and he would bring her on as a guest and everything, and eventually she got her own show, and now she's at MSNBC making I don't know, $7 million a year or something. I think she signed a couple of years ago. She signed like a $30 million contract for 4 years or something, which is a total waste of money, but. She was somebody that Olbermann brought up, and after Olbermann left, they stopped being friends because he felt stabbed in the back by her or something. So, yeah, it's Daily Kos is not something that should be taken seriously. If you're Bernie Sanders, you're somebody from his campaign, even Faz Shakir, who's his campaign manager, don't respond. And if you're going to respond, obviously just keep it to like a minimum and don't mention his name. Don't quote tweet him or anything. The way Bernie Sanders did it was smart because he just mentioned, oh yeah, people say I'm boring and that, my talking points haven't changed. Yeah, because nothing has changed in this country, so I have to keep harping away on the same problems. So what else are you going to do? We still don't have Medicare for all. We still don't have free college. We still haven't gotten rid of our student loan debt, which is Bernie wants to get rid of it with the $1.6 billion student debt that we're currently in. This is a topic that I talked about in the last episode, and yeah, so Bernie's doing that stuff, ending the wars, all that stuff, living wage. These things are not even close to happening, other than the conversation being, happening in, Democratic debates and stuff. That's still not happening. It hasn't happened. Now, it's good that we're having the conversation. That's a good step forward, but we need to actually get to the point of having the conversation and making sure it's out there for people to talk about it more. Now, it's being talked about a little bit, but the voters definitely have to get more informed on it as well. Not just progressives, because progressives obviously know about it, but outside of progressives, there's a lot more people that need to be informed on what the progressive policies are out there. So, and that's something Bernie Sanders does, and he's going to continue doing it no matter whether Marcos and his fucking goons, neoliberal goons, find it boring or whatever. So this next article is about Elizabeth Warren. How Elizabeth Warren is starting to become very liked among Wall Street fat cats and Wall Street executives. And this is an article from Bloomberg. It's from July 3rd. And the title says, Elizabeth Warren starts winning begrudging respect on Wall Street. And a couple of the couple of bullet points here. It says financiers are drawn to her intelligence and views on social issues. Senators' focus on inequality goes mainstream, professor says. So let's go through this article here a little bit. So here it starts off by going, kind of getting into the details of how people on Wall Street could support her. It says, there's a new whisper on Wall Street. Maybe Elizabeth Warren isn't so bad. The Democratic senator who rose to national prominence by calling for tough regulation after the financial crisis is winning respect from a small but growing circle of senior bankers and hedge fund managers. As the presidential candidate for Massachusetts takes aim at the rich and powerful with a slew of tax-raising policy proposals, some financial types who fit that description say she's proven capable and make some good points. If she ends up being the nominee, I'd have no trouble supporting her at all, said David Shamus, Chief Investment Officer of Atlas Merchant Capital, where he's a founding partner alongside former Barclays PLC head Bob Diamond. While Warren isn't Shamus's top choice, he said, I think she is smart. We're hardworking, responsible, and thoughtful. And I think she thinks markets are important. Shamus said people in his network who studied under Warren, a former professor at Harvard Law School, think highly of her, including some conservatives. Ooh, rinking endorsement. Conservatives are loving the so-called progressive Democrat. So why do they like her? For some Wall Streeters who lean liberal, Warren is an acceptable alternative to candidates who trigger their most visceral objections. Republican President Donald Trump on the right and Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist, on the left. You see that? How they're doing that? They're creating that juxtaposition, that kind of like, oh, look how much, these people, they don't like Bernie Sanders and they don't like Donald Trump, pretending as if they're the same person and they believe in the same things, which they don't at all. So quoting they're quoting Warren here. It says, it would be just wrong, Warren told CBS's Face the Nation in March, to call her a democratic socialist. I believe in markets that work, markets that have a cop on the beat and have real rules, and everybody follows them. At other times, she has derided parts of the financial industry as predatory. I clearly don't agree with everything she says, but I do give her credit for getting things done. Tom Nides, a Morgan Stanley vice chairman and former deputy secretary of state under Barack Obama, said of Warren. He didn't share which candidate he's supporting. Warren's work to set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the wake of the crisis was impressive, quote unquote. Knight said, you can't argue with that. Having an idea, driving it to fruition, and having set it up is really hard to do. So what is this? It says, so it talks about how Warren attacked a hedge fund manager who I guess she didn't know donated to her, and then she apologized. So it says, some who like Warren might find that her backing isn't welcome. Former hedge fund manager Whitney Tilson recounted a 2016 episode in which she criticized him on Facebook for being a Wall Street insider who stood to gain from Trump's policies. The attack surprised Tilson and his wife, who had previously made small donations to Warren and followed her career. She later apologized. And this is quoting Tilson here. Apparently in an article he wrote, it says, I agree with her general assessment that we've allowed multiple systems to develop in this country that screw average folks in countless ways, from education, healthcare, criminal justice, trade, etc. Tilson wrote in an article last week, despite the mishap, I'm glad she's running. So here it talks about how some people who might support Elizabeth Warren even donated to Republicans. Indeed, Shamus and others unwilling to commit to any candidates early, either with their vote or their money. His business partner Diamond, I think, what was his name? Bob Diamond, previously donated to campaigns for Republicans John McCain and Jeb Bush. So when Jeb Bush ran in 2016, in that crowded field of Republicans against Trump, apparently he donated to him, and then John McCain apparently when he ran. Not sure if they're referring to Senate campaign for John McCain or maybe even governor campaign when Jeb Bush ran, but probably most recently when they were running for president or when they ran for president. So it seems to me that these corporate executives, they want Warren as a gatekeeper who will eventually give in to their demands, and they pretty much say as much here. So check this part out. It says, those drawn to Warren cited her intelligence and stance on social issues. They expressed sympathy for her calls to bolster regulation after the financial crisis within reason and for her concerns about income inequality. There are worries among the Wall Streeters that if the wealth gap keeps growing, it will trigger a more radical backlash, what they ominously called the pitchforks. Yet that doesn't mean they support her proposal for a wealth tax. Psh, big surprise. And some privately predicted she will shift to the center if she becomes the nominee. That's a fucking huge red flag right there. If these people are already thinking that Elizabeth Warren is going to shift to the center, why should any progressive go out there and support her? It's crazy. I mean, just the mere fact that she supported Hillary Clinton, right after she won the in the opinion of many progressives, the rigged California primary, let alone just the entire fucking primary being rigged. But the fact that she supported her then and did not endorse Bernie Sanders when the race between Hillary and Bernie was so close in her home state of Massachusetts, she refused to endorse anybody. If she had endorsed Bernie, he would have won. And Hillary ended up winning by like less than a percentage point, I think, or something like that. I don't know if they did a recount for it because it was like just above that limit that they didn't have to recount it. I think the recount is when it's like 0.5% or 1% or something. It was right above that though. So, but yeah, the fact that these corporate executives think that they can get her to the center, ooh, huge red flag. So here it talks about Elizabeth Warren's relationship with Jamie Dimon, who is the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, who is one of the people on Bernie Sanders' anti-endorsement list, as we were talking about on the couple segments ago. Let's see here. So it says, yet Warren's criticism of the industry has at times flared into direct clashes with its most prominent leaders. Her book, A Fighting Chance, describes a heated discussion about regulation with J.P. Morgan Chase and Company Chief Executive Officer Jamie Dimon during an encounter in 2013. We weren't quite shouting, but we were definitely raising our voices. Dimon later echoed the views of many in finance at an industry event in 2015. I don't know if she fully understands the global banking system. Warren shot back. The problem for these guys is that I fully understand the system and I understand how they make their money, and that's what they don't like about me. And then Dimon apparently finds some of her ideas palatable. And the article points out how, despite that exchange, Dimon and Warren have met a few times and the visits went well. according to a person with knowledge of the talks who asked not to be identified, describing private meetings. In recent years, Diamond has also expressed concerns about many of the same issues Warren prioritizes, such as income inequality, stagnant wages, and soaring healthcare costs. So that's an attempt by Jamie Dimon to just throw a bone. He's just throwing a little bone at Warren and the people that support her, essentially, who, maybe they're not progressives, but they're left of center. So, that's throwing a bone at her and her supporters to be like, yeah, no, I totally care about income inequality and stagnant wages and soaring healthcare costs. But in reality, he doesn't really give a shit. He's just saying that just so he can appease them, as many of these corporate donors do, and as politicians do as well. But, so they're in the they have the same kind of habits. But, it's an attempt to appease them so that he can get them on their side and then make his ideas seem like decent, and then he's going to end up, essentially going against those ideas. But, in this article, it also points out how Warren still is going to be tough on Wall Street. People can make that determination for themselves if they really believe that or not. It says, yet there's no truce. Last week, she took aim at J.P. Morgan for reviving a policy pushing credit card customers to use arbitration to resolve disputes. In a letter, she urged the bank to, quote, reconsider your plans to resume exploiting its customers. Warren has no plans to ease off the industry. Nobody has been tougher on Wall Street than Elizabeth, and no one will be tougher on Wall Street as president than Elizabeth will be, the campaign said in an email statement. She wants to break up the big banks. And then it says, the industry has good reason to worry about Warren's ability to inflict pain. In 2016, she led calls to fire Wells Fargo and company CEO John Stumpf after the bank opened accounts without customer permission. That's fucked up. Then she demanded the ouster of his successor, company veteran Tim Sloan, saying he couldn't be trusted to clean up its scandals. After regulators signaled dissatisfaction with the progress, he stepped down in March, saying he didn't want to be a distraction. The bank is seeking an outsider to take over. And then here's in my opinion, one of the parts that's very kind of jaw-dropping to me, especially for somebody that's supposedly fighting against Wall Street and wants to be so tough on them. Apparently, she has received money. She's raised money from Wall Street donors. Now, these to be fair, these could be workers on Wall Street, but the people that are working on Wall Street are incredibly rich. It's not like there's some regular Joe working on Wall Street. Now, there could be people that are trading stocks and stuff, so they're traders. But the people that are working on Wall Street are not. They're wealthy people. They're not regular Joes making $50,000 a year, So anyway, the article says, despite her steady criticism of the industry, Warren raised $625,000 and $25 from donors who work in the investment and securities firms for her 2012 Senate campaign, according to data from the Center for Responsive Politics. Financiers were more comfortable with the Democrats then and probably saw her as less of a threat, said Jeffrey Berry, a political science professor at Tufts University. But that likely changed during her first term as she established herself as one of Capitol Hill's most fiercest critics of the industry. For her 2018 re-election bid, she drew $387,417 from the sector. To be sure, some backers may have felt less inclined to contribute because she was fending off an underfunded and a much weaker opponent. Though she got $53,760 from the sector in the first quarter, it's too early to project what she might raise for her presidential bid. So, yeah, in the first quarter, let's just say if she were to receive about $50,000 every quarter this year, that would be $200,000. And then let's just say she does the same thing in the next 2-3 quarters until November of 2020. So 3 quarters of 2020, and then heading in November, which is the fourth quarter. But then I guess you could consider October as well. So going into November though of 2020, she could probably get up to 150, 200,000, maybe 175,000. So I wouldn't be surprised. And then it says, it seems like the donors are aware of Wall Street's corruption, but It's not so fast. It says over the years, her views have become more accepted, Barry said. It says there is an increasing sense among the highly educated that the system is out of whack in terms of income inequality, and so people who work with money day in and day out are acutely aware of that, he said. Her indictment of income inequality and the role that Wall Street plays in that is becoming more mainstream. So again, that's just people, in this case, what's one guy, who is he? He's a political science professor. So I think he's noticing, or he's examining the fact that these people are finding her ideas to become a lot more palatable and a lot more feasible for them. And it's something that they can roll with as long as she goes to the center at some point, which they're already predicting that she's going to do anyway. So to them, that's cool, right? They can roll with that as long as she's going to go to the center at some point. So I wanted to play you guys a clip here of Elizabeth Warren. She gave an interview with TYT. Now, let me just play this for you, and then check out this interview, and then it's very short, not even an interview. It's a short, like 45-second clip. So just check out what she says here, to how she responds to Cenk Uygur's question, Cenk Uygur of TYT. So check out this clip, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So she's very clear there. She says that we need to be all in. I do not believe in unilateral disarmament. And I will take the PAC money, I'll take the corporate PAC money during the general election. Now, it's weird because Cenk Uygur, who asked that question, he did a full 15, 20-minute interview with her. I don't know, I think it was somewhere around there. But he did a long interview with her, asked her a bunch of questions. He asked her this question. He got this response. I don't know what he said after this. I don't know if he followed up or whatever. But he asked this question, and then, I don't know, this was from February and March, I think. And now when people ask him, do you support Elizabeth Warren even though she's decided to take corporate PAC money, corporate cash during the general election, do you support her? He says, that's not true. She never said that. That lie needs to stop. You guys need to stop that. Something along those lines. So he completely denies it now. So Cenk, he completely denies that Elizabeth Warren wants to take corporate PAC money when she just said it right there. You guys can listen to the clip again. She clearly said, I'm going to take corporate PAC money. I'm not going to I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. We need to defeat the Republicans. We need to win, blah, 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 all that bullshit. So Elizabeth Warren is not to be trusted. I have said this before. More people need to realize this. They need to realize that, you need to call her out. The primary is not over yet, so I'm not telling people just don't support her. But at least hold her feet to the fire if she's still not going to change. And she still refuses to not be a corporate puppet, essentially, and not be more palatable to the corporate executives out there. If she keeps, giving into them and appeasing them, then definitely don't support her. I mean, there's no point in supporting somebody that's going to be like that. When they talk about, I'm a progressive and stuff. And by the way, this is somebody that said, I'm a capitalist to the bone. I mean, who talks like that? I mean, it's so stupid. Capitalist to the bone. Who actually brags about being a capitalist and then says, I'm a progressive? That's just like Kamala Harris and talking about being a progressive prosecutor. This progressive prosecutor, capitalist to the bone, progressive capitalist. That's bullshit, man. That stuff doesn't. That's a oxymoron. Those are oxymorons. The best oxymorons I've ever fucking seen. So don't fall for that shit. It's total bullshit. It's total, just total. I don't know what to call it. It's just they're trying to manipulate people, and they're trying to convince people that they're totally moral and they're totally being truthful and honest with you, when in reality they're not. And it's just a bunch of talking points and a bunch of fake promises, empty promises from a bunch of empty suits, if you want to say that. Empty suits in regard to women, but yeah, fine, empty suits. And that's how I see them. I don't see them as being people that are honestly going to be people like Elizabeth Warren and all the other centrists running. I don't see them as people that can be trusted, and they have to be called out for their shit, because they're just going to keep doing it until people start actually calling them out. If we don't call them out, then they're gonna keep doing it and keep going and going and going. Regardless of what, how shitty the country is fucking suffering, they're going to keep doing it because they know that that's what their donors want. And we need to make sure that they don't give into the demands of their donors and the demands of their, democratic strategists and political strategists out there. Those people are fucking, losers anyway, and they just want to do what the donors say too. So they're just giving the same advice that the donors do. So in the state of Kentucky, there is a candidate that is running for Senate against Mitch McConnell. This is a woman that actually ran for Congress in the last midterms. She lost barely by like a few points, I think. And her name is Amy McGrath. She's a former Marine. Apparently she was the first woman to fly a jet, to become like a jet pilot or something, apparently. I'll get into that in a second. I have some remarks to say about that. But New York Times did a little profile on her and talked about her, opening up her, essentially starting her campaign. By the way, she was recruited by Chuck Schumer. I read an interesting article from Ryan Grimm of The Intercept, where it talked about Chuck Schumer basically recruiting her, and this is a plan by many, plan by Democrats, recruiting a lot of, former members of the CIA and former government officials and military people and shit. So apparently Amy McGrath is one of them. So the title of the article is "Amy McGrath Opens Campaign to Oust Mitch McConnell in Kentucky." So again, like I said, she's running against Mitch McConnell here, and I'm going to read a couple of the paragraphs here from this New York Times article. It says, Amy McGrath, a retired Marine lieutenant, colonel, and combat pilot whose star power in the Democratic Party in 2018 failed to capture her House seat in Kentucky, announced that she would seek to challenge Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican majority leader, in 2020. Ms. McGrath, 44, made her intentions known with a dark video denouncing Mr. McConnell, 77, who was first elected to the Senate in 1984 and served as the central ballast for President Trump in Washington. So he's basically like Trump's main, he's like his main defender, basically. Quoting McGrath here, it says, "Everything that's wrong in Washington had to start someplace," Ms. McGrath said in the video. "I started with this man who was elected a lifetime ago and who has bit by bit, year by year, turned Washington into something we all despise." She also reprised a story she used in her 2018 campaign against Representative Andy Barr, recounting that as a young woman, she wrote to Mr. McConnell, telling him I wanted to fly fighter jets in combat, to fight for my country, and that women should be able to do that. And noting that he never wrote back. It's like some sort of faux feminist, women, faux feminist women, identity politics, women have to be involved in the same things men are involved in type shit, but using the military. Anyway, so in a strange strategy, look at what she says. Look at how she's basically opposing Mitch McConnell here. Check this out. This is a quote from her. It says, "Kentuckians voted for Donald Trump because they wanted to drain the swamp and lower prescription drug prices," she said. "A lot of what has stood in the way of what Donald Trump promised is Senator Mitch McConnell." So she thinks that Mitch McConnell is the reason that Donald Trump doesn't want to lower prescription drug prices. So apparently Donald Trump has worked so fucking hard, and he's worked his fingers to the bone to make sure that prescription drug prices are going lower. I mean, come on, man. Does anybody really believe that? Even if he made that promise, how do you know he's worked? Like, you're basically saying he's worked so hard, because that's what she's saying. She's essentially, what she's saying is Trump has worked so hard to do this, and Mitch McConnell apparently is the only one to stand in his way, or is the main person to stand in his way. How about the fact that Donald Trump never wanted to lower prescription drug prices? How about the fact that Donald Trump is beholden to the pharmaceutical industry and the health industry, who are, the CEOs and corporate executives that are, donating millions of dollars to his campaign so that he continues to screw over regular people who are, dying from cancer and, can't get cancer treatment, can't get treatment for whatever horrible illness they have. How about that? How about that? Did you not think about it? Did you not think about the fact that Donald Trump is already fucking corrupt? But that's the thing. She knows that Donald Trump won in Kentucky, so she's, in a way, kind of as a proxy, she's sucking up to Donald Trump so that she can, this is my way of appeasing the voters that voted for Donald, the people that voted for Donald Trump. Oh, he's such a great guy. He wanted to lower prescription drug prices, and then opposing McConnell. So portraying Trump as the good guy in a way, and then McConnell as the bad guy, when in reality they're both bad guys, and they're both beholden to the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry, and letting people get screwed over and wanting to screw them over, basically. And by the way, because of this, apparently one of the publications in her home state of Kentucky referred to as a Trump Democrat, a pro-Trump Democrat. So that led to some mocking. I guess that was done in a mocking way. But yeah, and that's totally not. It's not totally inaccurate either. Okay, so it seems like already she's being painted as a far left liberal. Let me read the quote here, and then I have a video, which is it's actually the video. It's a video response to Amy McGrath declaring she's going to run, and it's from Mitch McConnell's campaign. So it's like a campaign video, like attacking her essentially. But let me read this quote first. It says, Amy McGrath lost her only race in a Democratic wave election because she is an extreme liberal who is far out of touch with Kentuckians. Kevin Goldman, Mr. McConnell's campaign manager, said in a statement, he said Ms. McGrath would have a heck of a platform that we'll be delighted to discuss over the next 16 months. So let me play you this clip of the campaign ad from McConnell's team. Check it out.
I am further blessed. I am more progressive than anybody has been.
And I think the wall is stupid. I mean, I really do. It's a waste of money.
This is what we need in this country. They're here. They're not going anywhere. Let's bring them in.
Yes, I would support a move towards universal health care. If we were to start 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and build a healthcare system from scratch, I think, in my opinion, single payer is the way to go.
I don't think government should be involved in making decisions on a woman's body.
So you think a woman on the way to the hospital to give birth could decide to abort it instead?
I don't think that government should be involved in a woman's right to choose what is happening
What
to her
about the rights of
body.
the unborn child?
I feel for the Congress to be a voice for progressive values.
Well, I don't know that I'm different than Democratic Party National.
Then, of course, the results of the election. We have a new commander-in-chief. And that morning I woke up like somebody in the second country. I mean, I felt like, what has just happened to my country? The only feeling I can describe that's any close to it was the feeling I had after 9/11.
I am further blessed. I am more progressive than anybody has been.
I love all that scary music they have in the background. Typical Republican ad. Typical establishment tactics. Well, to be fair, a lot of right-wingers do that too. But I mean, it's just typical fear-mongering and like, this evil, big, bad liberal. In reality, she's not even close to the far left. Yeah, she said a couple of times, I believe in single-payer healthcare. I believe in, being pro-choice and a woman, not having to, be controlled by the government, to not be allowed to get an abortion. Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful that you say all that stuff. But in reality, for a fact you don't believe that, which is why you're talking about how Donald Trump is supposedly, being blocked by Mitch McConnell from lowering drug prices. So that's the thing. She's one of those candidates. I'm going to be showing you a couple of other segments in a second too, where she she completely diverts from that narrative, which I guess she was probably pushing when she was running against the Kentucky representative in 2018 when she lost by a few points, barely lost. So that was probably all like remarks from then, and then now she's completely different because she's saying completely different things. It explains here in the article, it explains how many members of the military and government operatives are in Congress, and they love McGrath. And it quotes one of them here. It says, among the 67 new Democrats in Congress, 10 served in the military or intelligence agencies and were instrumental in returning control of the House to Democrats. The group has formed a tight bond in the 116th Congress. Many of those members, especially the women, campaigned with Ms. McGrath and are eager to see her run. I'm excited to support my friend Amy McGrath, said Representative Abigail Spanberger of Virginia, a former CIA operations officer who last year eked out a victory against a Republican incumbent. By the way, this is the person that was involved in it's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and Mark Pocan was going after them as like Child Abuse Caucus or something. So that was a segment I did earlier about the kind of the progressive and establishment Democrat infighting. So she's one of those people. It says her race to defeat Senate Majority Leader McConnell should matter to any American, regardless of party, who wants to see us get stuff done in Washington for the American people. Yeah, right. Okay. It says, now in this part of the article, McGrath references an old McConnell challenger. Now, she doesn't reference her by name, but this is in reference to Allison Lundergan Grimes. This is a woman that ran in 2014, and she released the stupidest ad against Mitch McConnell, and she got fucking blown out by like 20 points. Before I play that ad here, check out what she says here. It says, in 2014, Allison Lundergan Grimes, a Democrat who hoped to capitalize on Mr. McConnell's lack of popularity nationwide, failed to topple him, winning just 9 out of 120 counties. Damn. Ms. McGrath said she had learned a great deal from her unsuccessful House campaign. This is a different race, she said. Folks don't always win the first time they run. So check out this horrible ad from Allison Lundergan Grimes. It's a joke. And then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Mitch McConnell wants you to think I'm Barack Obama. Mitch is the same guy who thought Duke basketball players were UK, or who's attacking me on coal after doing next to nothing while we've lost thousands of coal jobs. He even said it's not his job to bring jobs to Kentucky.
I'm not Barack Obama. I disagree with him on guns, coal, and the EPA. And Mitch, that's not how you hold a gun. I'm Allison Lundergan Grimes, and I approve this message.
Oh my God. I've seen that ad like multiple times since 2014. It cracks me up every time. This lady is, so if for those of you guys who aren't watching, just listening, it's basically a video of her shooting, doing skeet shooting. She's skeet shooting in a field and just shooting her fucking shotgun or skeet shooting gun or whatever the fuck it is, and she's hitting a bunch of these fucking pellet things that fly in the air, and she shoots them, and then she's talking about how Mitch McConnell confused Duke and University of Kentucky, the two colleges, and then mocks him for how he holds a gun, and then at the end she says, I'm not Barack Obama. I support coal. I support like, dude, the last fucking ad you should be putting out there is saying how you don't support, because this was at a time when Obama was in office. He was president. The last thing you want to do is go out there and say how you don't support Barack Obama. How the fuck is that an inspiring message for a Democratic voter out there to support you? I understand it's Kentucky, but you got to go out there and be an actual Democrat, because as many, I think it's Kyle has definitely said this multiple times. I think Jank from TYT has said the same thing, that whenever voters have a choice of a Republican against a Democrat that uses Republican talking points, they're always going to go with the actual Republican, because that Democrat is just pretending to be a Republican. So this person looks at this like, wait, that doesn't sound right. This person is a Republican. I'm sorry, this person is a Democrat and is using Republican talking points. Why would I go for them when I have the real option right here, which is a Republican? So unless that Republican's totally unpopular and he's an asshole and he's I don't know, maybe he's a sexual harasser, I don't know, something terrible. He's got some sort of horrible scandal going on, just like the race in Alabama that Doug Jones won over that dude, that sexual harasser dude. Forgot his name. It was from 2018. He won in Alabama and barely eked it out. But in those cases, because that guy, Doug Jones is a big time conservative. And he was very much like a Manchin, Joe Manchin type Democrat. But he managed to win. He barely won, but he beat a fucking sexual harasser. So how hard is that, right? It's not that hard to beat that kind of person, right? So, yeah. So you beat that guy, yeah, that's great. I'm just but that's what I'm saying. When you have the option of a Republican and a Democrat who pretends to be a Republican, you're just going to go for the Republican. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. That's what happened when Allison Lundgren and Grimes released this stupid ass ad and lost by 20 points to McConnell. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Amy McGrath ended up with the same result. Maybe not 20 points, but I mean, especially since she's sucking up to Donald Trump. But she's going out there and she's talking about how Mitch McConnell is terrible and Donald Trump is a great guy, and people are going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. This person is a Democrat, but they're praising Trump. I don't know if I can trust them. I don't know if I can trust them to push Republican policies, because they're not an actual Republican, but they're using Republican talking points, and they're saying how Trump is doing wonderful things, and he's the Republican, and there's a Democrat, this is the Democrat saying this stuff. So it doesn't make any sense. So she basically says kind of the same kind of talking points in two different interviews. I'm going to play this full interview. It's like a 4-minute interview that Amy McGrath does with Jake Tapper of CNN, and there's another one after that. That's just the next clip is going to be a shorter part of a longer interview that I'm going to play. But this one is a full interview that McGrath does with Jake Tapper. Let's check this out, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
I sat at this table and I wrote a letter to my senator telling him I wanted to fly fighter jets in combat, to fight for my country, and that women should be able to do that. He never wrote back.
That senator that didn't write back was Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and the letter writer is his likely 2020 Democratic challenger, Amy McGrath, a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel and one of the first women to fly a combat mission in the FA-18 fighter jet. She's going to run to unseat McConnell in Kentucky. It's a state he's served for more than 3 decades. McGrath lost a close race for the House last year, but proved to be a prolific fundraiser. She was recruited to run for this seat by Chuck Schumer and others. Amy McGrath joins me now. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for joining us. I guess the first question I have is, President Trump won Kentucky by 30 points in 2016. He's going to be on the top of the ticket next year. You lost a House race in a Democratic wave season. You came close, but you didn't get it across the finish line. What makes you think you can beat McConnell in what will probably be a more difficult environment?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right to say that Senator McConnell is a very formidable foe. I think if you think about why Kentuckians voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp, bring back jobs, do big things in infrastructure, do things like bring down drug prices. And a lot of these things are being halted by Senator McConnell. For example, drug prices. President Trump has said this is his priority. He said the current system is very, very unfair. And this is important for Kentucky. Kentucky has the second highest per capita spending on prescription drug medication, over $2,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And who's stopping President Trump from doing this? Senator McConnell because he's bought off by Big Pharma. I mean, he gets $1.2 million in campaign cash in his last election. It's not rocket science. This is what's happening, and a lot of Kentuckians know this.
So this pitch that you're saying right now, which you said earlier today, prompted the Louisville Courier-Journal, one of your home state papers, to say that you seem to be casting yourself as a pro-Trump Democrat in ways, saying McConnell's the reason that a lot of things Trump promised to Kentuckians hasn't happened. Is that a fair depiction?
You know, I would say that I understand why the voters in Kentucky voted for Donald Trump. They are tired of the swamp. They are tired of the dysfunction. Frankly, voters in Kentucky really don't like both political parties. They think that's part of the problem. And folks like Senator McConnell, who have been around for 34 years, are not the answer. And I think many Kentuckians are seeing that. And that was a lot of the appeal of Donald Trump. He was an outsider. And so I think that's what I'm trying to say. I'm an outsider too. I'm not someone who ever believed I was going to be a politician. Jake, I just wanted to serve my country.
Right.
I had this dream. I wanted to fly fighter jets, and that's what I did. And along the way, I met my husband, a Navy pilot, and we got married. We have 3 kids, and it's amazing. But we both looked at each other over the last 3 years, like many Americans and many Kentuckians, and we've said, you know, hey, we need better leaders in this country. And there's no better example of that than in Kentucky.
So I can understand certainly why you're talking about how you understand why Kentuckians voted for Donald Trump in such overwhelming numbers. But it has been pointed out that you once compared the feeling you had when President Trump was elected to the feeling you had on 9/11. Won't that undermine the pitch, you think?
Well, what I was talking about was the fact that, you know, nobody really expected President Trump to win. And I was talking also about the entire 2016 cycle. You know, many of us were spurred into action by what happened in 2016, the labeling of each other as they're all communist, or they're all this, or they're all that. And the fake news, the divisiveness of our country was something I had never seen before. You know, my husband is a Republican. I'm a Democrat. We took stock of that after the election, and we said, you know, where are we as a country? And that way, it was the same thing for me, was looking at that tragic event and taking stock of where are we as a country. So that's what I was saying, and I can see why, you know, folks might be upset about that. But that's what I was saying.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, we thank you for your service. Good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Great to have you.
That's probably not the response at the end that you want to give to somebody that's interviewing you, because they're the one having you on their show. So, but anyway, that's least of our problems. The comparing, and this is something that was mentioned in the Mitch McConnell ad attacking her, where she compared Trump winning to 9/11. I mean, even if you think that, like, even if that's how you felt, why would you say that? That's crazy. I mean, yeah, it was a gut punch when Trump won. I felt the gut punch when Trump won. I was definitely surprised. A lot of people, other people were not surprised, like Cenk and, Cenk, when he was doing the TYT coverage, which I was actually watching, he was very surprised that Trump won, but he predicted that Trump would win. He went on mainstream media on ABC's, with George Stephanopoulos. He went on there in front of a whole panel, and he said that Trump would actually win. So, and Kyle Kulinski, he's described Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk. He's talked about this multiple times, and he's talked about how, you know, Trump won because of the Rust Belt, and he won because he, you know, went out there and said that, you know, I'm going to bring back factory jobs, I'm going to end TPP, I'm going to end the wars, and, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, to her credit, she did mention a couple of those things about how he's going to, you know, Trump's going to fix the infrastructure of the company, he's going to bring back jobs to America, blah, blah. Yeah, she's right about that, but that's not the pitch you want to use. So, and even Tapper mentions the whole 9/11 thing, like you're talking about, oh, this was such a gut punch about, you know, I was so surprised that it felt like, you know, 9/11 when Trump won. But then you talk about, oh, well, no, it was because of all the change that was happening and nobody expected it. No, that's not true. You don't compare somebody winning an election to 9/11 and then just pretend like, oh, there were so many different changes happening. No, You were affected by the fact, you were shocked and affected by the fact that this fucking monster, this maniac won. And you're talking about, you're pitching to Kentuckians about how he's promised to drain the swamp and he's not doing it, and somehow it's Mitch McConnell's fault. I can't believe she's using that argument. It's so absurd. And she's using this everywhere she's going. I'm going to play you one more clip here. This is in an interview with Morning Joe. And she's asked pretty much the same exact thing. And she repeats herself again. So let me play this for you real quick, one more time here. And check out this clip and check out how she basically repeats the same talking points again. It's a short clip because this whole segment was like 11 minutes long. I cut it down to like 2.5 minutes or so. So check this out, and then we're going to talk about it on the other side.
Amy, it's Willie Geist. Congratulations on getting into the race. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here this morning. There have been many people over the years who come at Mitch McConnell, who believe he or she were the candidate that were going to finally take him out politically. And he has persevered. He's been a resilient political candidate and a politician in Washington through the years. Why do you believe this time is different?
Well, and you're absolutely right to say he's very formidable, and he's been around 34 years. I think this is different. It's a different race because, Kentucky voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. Yeah. And you can say Kentucky is a very red state, but it's a very pro-Trump state. And if you think about why Kentuckians voted for Trump, they wanted to drain the swamp, and Trump said that he was going to do that. Trump promised to bring back jobs. He promised to lower drug prices for so many Kentuckians. And that is very important. And you know what? Who stops them along the way? Who stops the president from doing these things? Well, Mitch McConnell. And I think that that's really important, and that's going to be, my message, that the things that Kentuckians voted for Trump for are not being done. He's not able to get it done because of Senator McConnell.
Hi, Amy. It's Steve Ratner. As you well know, on the national stage, the presidential hopefuls come in a variety of colors and flavors, if you will, on issues. And I'd just like to ask you how you're going to position yourself on some of these issues, like Medicare for All, like the Green New Deal, like free college tuition. How do you run on those issues in the state of Kentucky?
Well, I think that, and I watch the Democratic debates with my husband and my family, and, a lot of times my husband is a registered Republican and I'm a Democrat, but I was an independent for many years. And there were times when, my husband and I looked at each other during the debates, and we were concerned that many of the candidates were pulling a little too far left from where we are, because we're both moderates. We're like most Americans. We get along and we just want reasonable solutions for some of these things. So I differ from some of the Democratic candidates because, I'm not for taking away private health insurance, as an example. I don't think we should upend our entire system in a Medicare for All, because there's a lot of people that like their insurance, but we should be fixing the system, as an example. I'm not for things like subsidizing health insurance for illegal immigrants. I think many Kentuckians feel that we have a problem with getting health insurance for many Americans, so we need to fix that first.
But wait, didn't you say in the clip that Mitch McConnell played? So the Mitch McConnell ad that they released, they quoted you. It was your voice, your face, a shot of you saying that ultimately single payer is the best policy that should be implemented. She said that. Now, unless she's an idiot, and she's like Kamala Harris, and she just likes to flip-flop all over the place and say one thing to one place and say another thing to another place based on the audience or the people that are sitting there. The single-payer, Medicare for All, whichever term you want to use, that means the elimination of private insurance. Now, when you made that comment in that montage of clips that Mitch McConnell's ad played, did you know that, or did you not know that, or were you just lying? See, that's the thing. I don't know what this lady is talking about. 1 second she's saying one second she's saying another thing. And all of a sudden she saw us. I'm so shocked. We were taken aback. Me and my right-wing Republican, she says he's a moderate, whatever. I don't know. She probably does. He's probably not even really that moderate, but whatever. My, Republican husband here, we were so shocked as we were watching these debates as they were stating the same policies that they were in favor of that I said I was in favor of. And then now you're coming on here and you're talking about how you don't believe in taking away private insurance. So either you're a liar or you don't know that private insurance is taken away when single payer or Medicare for all is implemented. You said you were in favor of single payer. So, I mean, this is not a good candidate. To be fair, she's not as bad as Alison Lundgren Graham. That woman was historically bad. She was just horrible. Because she was talking about how she wasn't even like Obama. Apparently, in fact, she was I believe a delegate for Hillary Clinton in 2008, and she was kind of part of that like anti-Obama coalition in 2008 because she was in favor of Hillary Clinton. And then when they asked her later on, I think it was during the 2014 midterms, or maybe it was even before the midterms, people were asking her, "Did you support Barack Obama? In 2008, did you vote for him?"
Did you vote for President Obama, 2008, 2012?
This election, it isn't about the president. It's about making sure we put Kentuckians back to work.
Did you vote for him?
I was actually in a way a delegate for Hillary Clinton, and I think that Kentuckians know I'm a Clinton Democrat through and through. I respect the sanctity of the ballot box, and I know that the members of this editorial board do as well.
So you're not going to answer?
Again, I don't think that the president is on the ballot as much as Mitch McConnell might want him to be. It's my name, and it's going to be me who's holding him accountable for the failed decisions and votes that he has made against the people of Kentucky.
Yeah, she basically couldn't answer the question, and she didn't want to admit that maybe she voted for Obama, she just didn't want to admit it, or maybe she actually didn't want it, or maybe she didn't she didn't want to, basically, I guess in her mind, probably seeing it as possibly trashing Obama. So she didn't want to attack Obama and for it to hurt her chances in her, election against McConnell. But either way, I mean, she was a horrible candidate. So this woman is she's built in the same mold as Lundgren Grimes in the sense of being this moderate type, oh yeah, I'm so moderate, But listen, I get I understand it's Kentucky. Kentucky is a right-wing state. They voted for Trump overwhelmingly by 30-something points. But at the same time, you have to consider the fact that, again, like I said before, you can't vote for nobody's going to vote for a Democrat who spouts Republican talking points when they have the option of a Republican. Why would they do that? You'd have to be stupid. Even if you're a Republican, because there's a lot of idiotic Republicans out there. To be fair, there's a lot of idiotic Democrats out there, but there's a lot of idiotic Republicans who are married to the idea of I just support anybody that's pro Second Amendment and anti-PC and anti-abortion, and they have their specific issues that they're just in favor of, and as stupid as they fucking sound, they see somebody like Amy McGrath pretending to be a Republican and they don't like it, and they're not gonna vote for that. You're not gonna win. And my prediction ultimately is that Amy McGrath is gonna get fucking steamrolled, just like Mitch McConnell. I'm just like Mitch McConnell did to Alison Lundgren Grimes. Again, I don't think it's gonna be as bad, but I don't think he's gonna have any issues beating her. Maybe it won't be 20 points. But it's going to be bad. It's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 points, I would say, because she's not as horrible as she was, but she was so horrible, and it's okay, you can't give her credit for not being as bad as somebody that's really, really bad. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, McGrath is just she's a typical right-wing Democrat, Joe Manchin type Democrat, and. By the way, when it comes to the whole idea of you shouldn't push progressive policies in right-wing red states. Listen, Bernie Sanders, he went to West Virginia. This is a famous moment in, I believe it was 2017. It was after Trump was elected. Bernie Sanders went to West Virginia. He did a town hall with MSNBC's Chris Hayes, one of the honestly still somewhat decent people at MSNBC is Chris Hayes. Hayes brought him on. They did his town hall. Bernie Sanders spoke in a town hall in front of a bunch of West Virginians. A bunch of people said they got fucked over by Donald Trump. They got screwed over. He's not doing the job that he's promised he would do. We don't trust him. We don't think he's, ultimately going to be for us, regular people. He's not going to help us when we need him most. And Bernie Sanders responds by saying, okay, I'm the antithesis of Donald Trump. I believe in Medicare for all. I believe in free college. I believe in a living wage. I believe in ending the wars. I believe in, ending the student debt loan crisis. I believe in unions. I believe in higher wages for those unions. I believe in you having the right to fight for your job to not be a terrible job, because that's what it is when you don't have a union. So I support your right to be, to work under a union job, so that you have the protections that you deserve, especially in a what they call coal country, which is in West Virginia. They have a lot of coal jobs there, and if anybody needs unions, it's those people. And he said all this stuff, and they stood up and they clapped for him. They clapped for him, gave him a standing ovation like this. All these people, after every word he said, after every great progressive thing he said, they clapped for him. And West Virginia, they also went heavily for Donald Trump too. Joe Manchin is from West Virginia. Bernie was in Joe Manchin's backyard saying these things. And he got a standing ovation from these people that all voted for Trump. Trump country, coal country, whatever you want to call them. They all voted for Trump. And they all wanted Trump to win. They all voted for him. They all thought he was going to, be there for him. He wasn't. When Bernie Sanders pointed out all the things that he was going to do for them, and they realized that Trump isn't going to be there for him, they, gave Bernie a standing ovation. They loved it. And Bernie, he was just being himself. He was putting out his progressive policies out there, and they appreciated him for his honesty and his candor, and that's it. The rest is history, because after that, Bernie Sanders has gone to Fox News town halls, as he did recently, and he's gone standing ovations there, stayed in the same progressive policies. He's gone to all other parts of the country, whether it's the Deep South or anywhere else, and he's gotten a ton of praise from audience members. People have been giving him hugs, and they've been, shaking his hand. They've been, roaring and giving him applauding and standing ovations for all the wonderful policies that he puts out there that are progressive policies. And what does Amy McGrath do? What does Alison Lundgren-Grimes do? What do all these right-wing candidates, Joe Manchin, all these types do? All the other old ones that lost in 2016, Joe Donnelly and all these people, Claire McCaskill's another one. What did they do? All these people, they talked about how right-wing they are and how they're moderate, so-called. They're not really moderate. They just claim they are. To them, because our political spectrum in this country is so tilted to the right, they think they're moderate. But that's what they did. And they lost. A lot of those people lost. Now, you can say that a lot of the people that, ran as so-called moderates won in 2018, because they did, but also a lot of Justice Democrats won. That's what Ayanna Pressley did. That's what Ilhan Omar did. That's what Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez did. Now, she beat what's his name? She beat Joe Crowley, but that was in a tough ass election against a guy that's outspending her 4-1, 3-1, whatever it was. He was there for, he's in his seat for 18 years, I think it was 20 years, and she beat him. So, you can talk about how that wasn't an actual wasn't an actual competitive election, because she won the primary, not the actual. It wasn't competitive at all in the general, but it was mainly competitive, and obviously, up for grabs, I guess. Well, not up for grabs, but it was going to be a tough battle. But either way, it was a tough battle in the primary anyway. And that's why the whole idea of primarying, like the Justice Democrats do, that's why they do it, because they know primarying is just as important as the general election. The primary, general election, you got to win both of them. And the primary, just like the regular season in sports, the regular season prepares you for the playoffs and the finals and everything. The primary in elections, political elections and political, the political situations that you're in as a candidate, that prepares you for the general election. And that's exactly what happened. And Amy McGrath is not going to be prepared. she's going, I guess she's going to be the main primary candidate. So I don't know if she's running against anybody else or anybody, but okay, fine. She wins the primary. Big deal. You're going up against a bunch of other right-wing Democrats. So, and then maybe you're the best one because you have the most money behind you. Because I heard she got like a bunch of money behind her, and she's, raised $2.5 or $2.4 million in the first week or first month, something like that. First week, I think. And she's also recruited by Chuck Schumer, and then she ran in the last election as, running for Congress. So yeah, she's pretty well known among people in Kentucky. So that's not surprising. But when it comes to actually being a candidate that people would want to support, Amy McGrath is not one of them. So she can talk about how she's for the people and for, fighting Mitch McConnell, and then Donald Trump is wonderful and all that stuff. She can suck up to Donald Trump and hate on McConnell all she wants. But ultimately, she's not gonna be the candidate to beat him. I guarantee you. All right, guys, that is going to be the end of the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching on Periscope and Facebook Live. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Before we get going, once again, don't forget to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith. If you can become a patron and give me a generous contribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, remember, if you want more information about this podcast, check out the Prog Square. That would be hashtag the Prog Square on Twitter. That will direct you to all of my live broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. And I hope to see you guys again next week. And I hope you guys have a great week. And we'll see you again next time. Take care.